With Section 1, The Night the Allies Came. August 20th, 1968. Prague, Czechoslovakia. Shortly before midnight. The city is quiet in a way only Central European capitals can be. Tram wires hum faintly above empty streets. The Vltava River moves slowly beneath Charles Bridge, and the last conversations drift out of cafes as doors close for the night. At Ruzyně Airport, Sbirul, a Czechoslovak air traffic controller named Milan Kovář, watches his radar screen with mild boredom. Night shifts are usually uneventful. Civilian flights are finished. Military traffic, if any, is scheduled well in advance. Then the screen flickers. One blip becomes several, then dozens. They are coming fast, too fast, and they are not answering civilian air traffic calls. Milan leans closer, his cigarette forgotten between his fingers. The identification codes are wrong. The approach patterns make no sense. These are not commercial aircraft. At Kodam 23, Zul-5, the first Soviet An-12 transport planes descend through the darkness. They land without permission. Within minutes, armored personnel carriers roll out of their cargo bays. Paratroopers from the 7th Guards Airborne Division fan out across the tarmac, rifles raised, boots pounding concrete. Airport security is overwhelmed before they can react. Radio equipment is seized. Control towers are occupied. By midnight, Prague's skies and its future are no longer its own. Across the country, the same scene unfolds. From the north, Polish units cross the border. From the east, Soviet tank armies roll in from Ukraine. From the south, Hungarian divisions advance. From the west, East German formations stand ready, halted at the last moment only to avoid the symbolism of Germans re-entering Prague. Nearly 200,000 troops, backed by 2,000 tanks, move simultaneously, executing one of the largest military operations in post-war Europe, against a country that has fired no shot, inside a modest apartment near Wenceslas Square. Anna Novakova, a 22-year-old university student, is woken by a low, unfamiliar vibration. At first, she thinks it is thunder. Then the windows rattle. She pulls the curtain aside and sees a column of tanks crawling down the boulevard. Steel tracks grinding against asphalt. Red stars gleam on their turrets. Soldiers sit rigidly on top, fingers tight around rifle stocks, eyes darting at the buildings above them. Anna does not scream. She simply whispers, "They're here." Only hours earlier, there had been no indication, at least none the public could see, that invasion was imminent. For months, Alexander Dubček, first secretary of the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia, had assured the nation that negotiations with Moscow were tense but ongoing. He had spoken of unity, of compromise, of loyalty to socialism. Behind closed doors, the reality was far darker. Since January 1968, Dubček had overseen what would soon be called the Prague Spring, a rapid, unprecedented loosening of communist control. Censorship had been dismantled. Political debate returned to newspapers and radio. Travel restrictions were eased. The secret police were restrained. It was not a rejection of socialism. It was an attempt to humanize it. In Moscow, this experiment was watched with growing alarm. Leonid Brezhnev, General Secretary of the Soviet Union, did not see reform. He saw infection. If Prague proved that socialism could survive without fear, then the entire Eastern Bloc might follow. And if that happened, Soviet power would fracture from within. Throughout the summer, Soviet and Warsaw Pact forces had conducted what they called training exercises along Czechoslovakia's borders. Officially routine, unofficially rehearsals. NATO intelligence services noticed the buildup, but analysts dismissed it as pressure, not preparation. In Washington, London, and Bonn, the prevailing belief was that Moscow would not risk international outrage by invading a loyal ally. They were wrong. At number 30, tanks enter Wenceslas Square. By Dawn 1, troops surround the Haini Central Committee building. At Dawn 2, Soviet soldiers storm Radio Prague. Inside the broadcasting studio, announcer Vera Shchovichkova refuses to stop speaking as boots echo down the hallway. "This is Radio Prague," she says calmly into the microphone. "We are under occupation. Remain peaceful. Do not provoke violence. A rifle butt smashes the control panel. The signal dies. Within minutes, a backup transmitter hidden elsewhere in the city goes live. The voice returns. The truth, it seems, is harder to occupy than territory. As dawn approaches, confusion turns into fury. Crowds gather. Not armed, not organized, but determined. Civilians block roads with buses and trams. Street signs are torn down or turned around to disorient the invaders. Walls are covered with hastily painted slogans. Go home. We are not counter-revolutionaries. 1968 is not 1945. Soviet soldiers, many of them teenagers from rural Russia, stare back in disbelief. They have been told they are here to stop fascists, to rescue socialism, to save a brother nation from Western subversion. Instead, they are met by unarmed civilians shouting at them in Russian. Why are you here? Who invited you? Go back to Moscow. Some soldiers lower their rifles, others tighten their grip. Near the Stower National Museum, a tank commander panics as the crowd presses too close. A shot rings out, then another. A man collapses onto the pavement, blood spreading beneath him. The illusion of a peaceful intervention shatters in an instant. Inside the Pervats Presidium building, the Prague, Czechoslovakia's leadership is in crisis. Alexander Dubček, pale and exhausted, listens as reports flood in. Airports seized, radio stations attacked, cities occupied. The army, under strict orders, has not engaged. There will be no military defense. At 4:00, Soviet officers arrive. There is no negotiation. Dubček and several senior officials are arrested and placed under armed guard. By morning, they are flown to Moscow, not as guests, but as captives. As the aircraft lifts off, Prague burns quietly below them, not in flames, but in betrayal. By sunrise on Belfront, August 21st, though the invasion is complete, Czechoslovakia, a sovereign state, has been occupied overnight by its own allies. The world wakes up to the news in disbelief. In Western Europe, newspapers rush out emergency editions. In Washington, analysts scramble to explain how they missed the signs. In the United Nations, Soviet diplomats prepare to justify the unjustifiable. But in Prague, explanations no longer matter. Only reality does. And reality now rolls on steel tracks. Section 2. The Realization. August 21st, 1968. Early morning, Prague. As the first pale light of dawn creeps over the rooftops, the scale of what has happened becomes impossible to ignore. Smoke hangs low over the city. Not from fires, but from exhaust fumes, spent gunpowder, and the constant grinding of armored tracks. Tanks sit at major intersections like metal monuments, their barrels angled slightly downward, not yet firing, but always threatening. For Lieutenant Sergei Ivanov, a 19-year-old conscript from the outskirts of Novosibirsk, this is not how the operation was supposed to look. He sits atop a T-55 tank, helmet slightly too large for his head, hands resting stiffly on his rifle. He had been told they were coming to stop fascists, that armed counter-revolutionaries had seized Prague, that the people would welcome them. Instead, an old man stands in front of his tank, tapping the barrel with a trembling finger. Why? The man asks in Russian. Why are you here? Sergei does not answer. He does not know how. By mid-morning, the streets are filled, not with soldiers, but with civilians. Students link arms across roadways. Factory workers drag buses sideways to block tank columns. Tram conductors abandon their vehicles, leaving them stalled deliberately across intersections. Everywhere, hand-painted signs appear, scrawled in hurried strokes. Go home. Dubček have socialism. Your leaders lie to you. The resistance is chaotic, uncoordinated, and devastatingly effective. Soviet units find themselves lost in cities they were supposed to control within hours. Street signs have vanished. Locals give false directions. Maps are useless when every landmark looks the same. Commanders shout into radios clogged with static. What is your position? We don't know. Repeat. We don't know. This is not warfare as taught in manuals. This is occupation without consent. Inside the Submarines. Central Committee Building. A hastily assembled group of remaining Czechoslovak officials listens to Radio Prague's backup broadcasts, crackling through a small transistor radio. The voice is calm, defiant. This is Radio Prague. We repeat. No one invited foreign troops onto our territory. Remain peaceful. Do not collaborate. Every word is an act of resistance. Soviet forces hunt desperately for the hidden transmitters, raiding basements, factories, private apartments. Each time one signal goes silent, another emerges elsewhere. It becomes a battle not of bullets, but of voices. At Wenceslas Square, the tension reaches breaking point. A crowd presses close to a Soviet tank parked near the Mek's National Museum. Shouting, gesturing, pleading. The tank commander, isolated, sweat streaking his face beneath his helmet, misinterprets movement as attack. Someone throws a stone. It strikes the hull with a dull clang. The commander panics. A single shot echoes, then a burst. When the firing stops, a young man lies motionless on the pavement. Blood pools beneath his chest, dark against the stone. Silence falls. For a moment, even the tanks seem to hold their breath. Then screaming begins. The myth of a peaceful intervention dies right there, on the stones of Prague. Oh, word spreads quickly. Hospitals fill with the wounded. Makeshift clinics open in schools and churches. Doctors work without rest, treating gunshot wounds inflicted by men wearing the insignia of brotherly nations. Priests open their doors. So do shopkeepers. So do strangers. In alleyways and courtyards, whispered conversations replace shouts. How long will this last? Will the West help us? Where is Dubček? No one has answers. In Moscow. The answer has already been decided. Inside the Kremlin, Leonid Brezhnev listens to situation reports delivered in clipped, emotionless language. Casualties, resistance, international reaction. The operation is succeeding, but not cleanly. Brezhnev is not concerned with bloodshed. He is concerned with precedent. Czechoslovakia must not be allowed to believe this can end any other way. Orders are clear: stabilize, occupy, replace leadership, at any cost. On the outskirts of Prague, at Instet Ruzyně Airport, Byakto, a Soviet transport plane, waits with engines idling. Its passengers are not soldiers. They are prisoners. Alexander Dubček sits in silence, staring at the floor. His hands tremble, not from fear, but from exhaustion. For months, he had believed compromise was possible, that socialism could reform itself without violence. Now, surrounded by armed guards, he understands the truth. There will be no negotiation, only submission. As the aircraft lifts off, Prague shrinks beneath the clouds, a city occupied by allies, abandoned by the world. By afternoon, the realization settles in. This is not a temporary show of force. This is not pressure. This is not assistance. This is occupation, and it has come wearing the uniforms of friends. Section 3. The Doctrine of Force. August 21st, 1968. Late afternoon, Moscow. The Kremlin's corridors are silent in a way that Prague is not. Thick carpets absorb footsteps. Heavy doors close without echo. Outside, the city continues its routine. Traffic, pedestrians, summer heat. But inside the seat of Soviet power, history is being fixed into place. Leonid Brezhnev sits at the head of a long, polished table, glasses resting low on his nose, fingers steepled as another report is read aloud. Civilian resistance continues. Radio broadcasts persist despite countermeasures. Casualties are higher than projected. Brezhnev does not interrupt. He has already made peace with the numbers. What matters is not how many die, but what survives and what must not. For years, the Soviet Union has ruled Eastern Europe through loyalty, fear, and memory. The memory of 1945, of liberation from Nazism, of Red Army graves scattered across foreign soil. But Czechoslovakia in 1968 is different. There are no fascist banners, no armed militias, no civil war. There are students, journalists, workers, reformist communists, and that is precisely the danger. If socialism can be reformed peacefully in Prague, then it can be questioned everywhere. Brezhnev looks around the table. This cannot be allowed to appear reversible, he says at last, his voice flat. The order is understood, not just to occupy, but to instruct. Back in Prague, The lesson is being taught street by street. By evening, additional Soviet units move deeper into the city. Loudspeakers mounted on armored vehicles blare announcements in broken Czech and formal Russian. Remain indoors. Do not resist. Curfew is in effect. But people do resist, quietly now. They stop shouting. They start watching. Windows fill with faces as tanks pass. Conversations retreat indoors. Radios are turned low. Children are pulled away from streets. The occupation shifts tone, from chaos to control. At Radio Prague. The final broadcasts of the day go out from a hidden transmitter operating on borrowed time. The announcer's voice is hoarse but steady. We ask the world to remember us, she says. We ask our allies to look at what they have done. Those listening understand. This may be the last time they hear these words spoken freely. Within hours, the signal disappears. This time, it does not return. Across the country, arrests begin. Not en masse, not yet, but selectively. Editors, student leaders, reform-minded party officials. Men are taken at night. Women questioned for hours. Files reopened. Old accusations revived. The Statní bezpečnost, once restrained under Dubček's reforms, re-emerges, now guided and reinforced by Soviet advisors. The machinery of repression, briefly paused, grinds back to life. At Bruzinya Airport, the aircraft carrying Alexander Dubček lands under gray skies. He is escorted through corridors he has walked before, but never like this. In a guarded room, he is presented with documents. They are not framed as demands. They are framed as reality. The Moscow Protocol. Czechoslovakia will accept the temporary presence of Warsaw Pact troops. Reforms will be halted. Press freedom will be restored to its previous limits. Party control will be reasserted. Dubček reads slowly. He does not argue. He asks one question. How many will die if I refuse? No one answers. They do not need to. On August 26, 1968, Dubček signs. When news reaches Prague, there is no riot, only exhaustion. People sit in cafes without speaking. Newspapers publish bland statements filled with empty words. The language of reform is replaced by the language of inevitability. The Prague Spring is over, not with a final battle, but with a signature. In the weeks that follow,